Hey guys, this is Gaijin Hunter. With all this talk that I've been giving about monster types and the evolution of the monsters in the Monster Hunter series, a lot of questions have come up of what exactly does it mean by normal species, subspecies, and rare species, because these terms are not necessarily always used in every region and they come up quite a bit. So in this video I want to take a look at the normal, sub, rare, and variants from all the different games of the mainline series to go through there and explain how it is that the game uses them and what they are. Of course, we'll start out by stating the obvious, which are there are normal species of the monsters, which don't have any special titles. In Japanese, the term that is generally used is genshu, gen being sort of the base or current one, and shu for variety or species. So far, going all the way up to Sunbreak, because I'm not going to include anything about wilds in this video, we have 129 mainline monsters when we exclude some special ones like the Behemoth from Final Fantasy or the Leshen from The Witcher. These span across 14 types, which I've been covering on my channel, so hopefully you guys are watching and enjoying those bestiary vids. So I won't list them all out here, but these are the base monsters as you know and love them. So the first big one which throws off some people is Subspecies, or in Japanese, Ashu. There are 50 monsters so far up through Sunbreak that have a subspecies. Now, there is a difference between what subspecies means in the real world versus what it means in the context of Monster Hunter. It doesn't necessarily match up. Honestly, if we're going to be really crude here, we can just say they're kind of like shiny Pokemon in a way. But basically, once the guild, who's on the main continent, has established what they consider to be the common type of a monster that they would run into, for example, a red Rathalos. Anytime they venture out into like an island or a different environment where they spot something that is not quite the same, it's a monster that has adapted to its local environment, most generally has a different size, they're either smaller or larger, and they have a different color, and perhaps slightly different hunting habits. So it is worth noting where subspecies has some very, specific scientific meaning in our real world, with lots of different things that have to do with like interbreeding and, divergence of DNA and stuff like that. It's not that complicated in the game. In fact, because this is just a guild classification, there are several subspecies that, by the guild's own definition, are technically not subspecies, but because historically that's how they were categorized, they just run with it. So let's play the game of the guild being the guild, and let's go through some of the more well-known examples of subspecies that are technically not subspecies even by Monster Hunter's definition. For example, the Ashen Lao Xiaolong is not actually a subspecies. They later discovered that it's just a Lao Xiaolong that was in the volcanic regions for way too long and bathed in way too much volcanic dust and has taken on a gray hue. The most famous and well-known example of a misclassification would be the Black Diablos. It's not actually a subspecies. What it is during the mating season, the female Diablos will turn black and get quite excitable. So that's what they are. Then you get rare monsters like the Dalamadur, or its subspecies, the Sha Dalamadur. You can't blame the guild, they don't run into these scenes every day, so when they classified it as a subspecies, they didn't realize that this is just a regular Dalamadur that has molted its skin. It's a good shedding. If any of you have pet crabs, you might already know this, but the Plum Daimyo Hermitor, being a sort of plum blue color versus the red one, just means that it didn't get a very healthy diet, including stuff as carotenoids, which help them sort of remain healthy and vitamin sufficient and gives them that nice red color. Same thing going with the Terra Shogun Senator. Technically it's not a subspecies, but it is a Shogun Senator that has moved into some pretty harsh environments like the volcanic area and is dining on very mineral rich stuff, which has made its shell hard and of course gives it this beautiful red hue. In very similar fashion, a black Gravios is in fact just a regular Gravios that lives in really, really hot areas, and the magma and the heat has caused a chemical reaction which has given it a different color. So these classic examples would be more similar to that of a variant, which is going to be one of the next ones that we talk about and one of the final ones. Before we get there though, there is one classification which is not very clear in the English game, but is very clear in the Japanese, which is rare species. In Japanese, this is Kishoshu, which means rare species, just as is. And these are kind of a big deal. There's only 6 rare species in the mainline series of Monster Hunter going through Sunbreak. You see them down here. We got the Silver Rathalos, Gold Rathian, Lucent Nargacuga, Abyssal Lagiacruz, Molten Tigrex, and the Violet Mizutsune. These are the most rare type of subspecies that a monster can get. And almost as a rule, they are very powerful. So they're generally much larger than the regular species and much more powerful. Not quite the same as an Elder Dragon, but getting closer in terms of power. So the guild does require special permits in order to hunt them. This is not due to they don't want them to become extinct or anything. This is more for the hunter's safety. Unless you are very skilled, you are not going to have a good outcome if you try to go up against one of these. So we have normal species, subspecies, and then the rare species. And everything else is considered a variant. In Japanese, this is Tokushu Kotai. And this just means a special individual. And there are 16 of them within Monster Hunter, just base called variant. These are normal species of a monster that for some reason, be it their environment, a traumatic event, or just an anomaly, something has caused these monsters to behave and act different and more powerful than their normal ones. So you see a few examples here. We've got like the Furious Rajang, I think is the best example of a variant. Then we've got the Chaotic Gore Magala, which obviously is a Magala that has sort of failed through its evolutionary step and is in great pain. We've got the All-Mother, who is just a Narwa who has dined upon her mate, Ibushi. We have stuff like the Scarred Yangaruga, which has made it very upset. And then we've got stuff like the Savage Devil Joe, who is just absolutely infuriated. So they weren't born like this, but for any specific reason, they are considered special variants. So yeah, 129 normal monsters, 50 subspecies, 16 variants, and 6 rare species doesn't quite add up to all the monsters in Monster Hunter, and that's because starting with the 4th generation, we have special sort of categories of variants for a specific game. The first example of this is from Monster Hunter 4 and 4 Ultimate, which is the Frenzied monsters and the Apex monsters. I know Apex is a term Monster Hunter likes to use a lot, but this is specifically Apex in the context of the Frenzy virus. The terms in Japanese for a Frenzied monster is Kyoryuka, which just means crazy or mad wyvern disease or condition. And then going Apex is Kyokugen Jotai, Kyokugen being sort of like breaking the limit. So the Frenzy virus is attached to Gore Magala and Shagaru Magala. Not only does Gore have this virus inertly in its body, but it also spreads it via that sort of like fluffy dandruff that you see on its wings here, and also through its breath attacks. This allows it to use some sensory organs to see around it because it doesn't have eyes. If monsters inhale it, they can become infected. And if a monster miraculously overcomes the Frenzy virus, which is a rare condition, they will then be able to weaponize and use it, which is called going into an Apex state. For those of you who have not had the pleasure yet of playing Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate, here's a few details. Again, Frenzy in Japanese is very similar to the name that we use for rabies, which is Kyokenbyo. Kyoken being kyo for like crazy or mad, and ken being for dog. So they're using Kyoryuka, Kyo being the same one to have something mad or crazed, and then Wyvern, so it's kind of like the Mad Wyvern disease. On the left we see a normal Tigrex and its render, and when there is an outbreak it does get that icon on the quest information, and as you can tell, they are quite infected and they act quite erratic and powerful. Out of all these, there are only 8 monsters in the 4th generation of games that have the power to overcome this virus and to sort of make it their own. These are referred to as Apex monsters. It's more of a condition than it is a monster, which is Kyokugen Jotai, which means sort of like breaking the limit or an extreme condition state for the monster. Here we have a Devil Joe and a very scary looking render of an Apex Devil Joe. There's a whole bunch of system mechanics that go around Apex monsters, which I won't get into now, but this is very much an endgame mechanic and system that they introduced in the 4th generation. Moving on to Monster Hunter Generations and Generations Ultimate, we've got Hyper Monsters, which is Domoka in Japanese, and Deviants, which is a new category of variants called Futatsuna Mochi, which is a dual-named monster. Hyper, I thought, was a really fun system. Basically, this was just a state where a monster was very agitated and very aggressive. You would see sort of this glowing stuff around certain body parts. And for a limited period of time, that body part would become hyper, meaning it dealt more damage, there was special effects. But if you hit those spots while they were hyper, you'd be able to build up more gauge for your hunter arts. This was kind of like taking hunter arts and giving it to the monsters themselves. It was a really cool system, had a lot of unique items that you could drop from these monsters so you can craft a bunch of new armor. In Japanese it's just moldoka, moldo meaning ferocious. It's a very unusual word even in Japanese. When they announced it, people were like, how do you read that? It's a fun system that applied to a wide range of monsters. The Generations and Generations Ultimate also introduced a new special series or line of variants called Deviants. These are 18 monsters in those two games, and these are variants that are so large and that have grown such special abilities due to their overcoming their harsh environments that they're called a secondary name. They've got a feature that is just largely exaggerated or more powerful than the regular ones. So they're not born like this, but they are special deviants that you can hunt. A deviant monster in Japanese is called Futatsuna Mochi. Futatsuna just means two names, and this is because they gave them two names literally. We have like the Arzuros, and then we've got the Crimson Helm Arzuros. So they're not a different species of monster, but because they are so unique and so different and so much more powerful than the regular monsters, that they are kind of treated as such. Moving on to 5th generation, there was a new type of variant introduced, which is Tempered, which is the Rekisen, and Arc-Tempered monsters, Rekisen O. Tempered monsters are special variants that sort of denote a monster that is old and very battle-worn. Like these are the war veterans. They're tempered through all their various encounters. So they are by default tougher and stronger than the normal monsters that you encounter. And as a visual thing, they sort of have this metallic sheen to their bodies, and their hunts offer unique rewards. It's a little bit similar to like the Hyper system was in Generations and Generations Ultimate, or perhaps Frenzy monsters in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. This was a cool new system introduced into World that would allow you to sort of hunt harder versions of monsters for some extra rewards. Now, I'm not using the actual world render for Diablos because I didn't want to include a screenshot next to a render. It just feels a little weird, but I felt that this older one of Diablos is a really good depiction of what they look like in the game. So you notice that the tempered monsters get this sort of like purple outline to their bodies, and when you do notice them, they are quite large and they are quite shiny. The Japanese name is the same as English, like in Tempered by Battle. It's Reki, which means history or history, and Sen, which means Tatakai, or fight or battle. So these are just battle veteran monsters. As a really fun endgame system, I mean fun depending on who you ask, but I greatly enjoyed them, was the Arc-Tempered monsters. These are an exclusive group of about a dozen elder dragons who were even more powerful. So if you notice, instead of a purple icon, they got the orange ones, and these were great, really big event quests that they released, and these monsters were way more powerful, had a lot more health, they even had some new attacks and behaviors. And this is just taking Rekisen, which means the battle hardened or the veteran, and adding in the King O to the top of it. So Rekisen O is a very, very powerful Arc-Tempered Elder Dragon. Moving on to the next series, which is Rise and Sunbreak, we have two new series of variants. One is the Apex. I love that they're reusing the exact same name that they used for the Apex variants in Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. And then also this system of Afflicted and Risen monsters. So the Apex monsters here, and again, I don't know why they used the same term. I don't think they should have, but these are monsters. There was only 6 of them. These are monsters that were affected by the rampage and the violent storms of Ibushi. And they managed to survive, but because of it, they're in sort of like a constant state of just fear and anger. And they are literally just going on a rampage in the rampage system. These monsters all fought really interesting, and I thought that maybe perhaps a design decision choice that the Deviants, which are from Generations Ultimate, which were just really powerful versions of the normal monsters, They shared a lot of similarities, I think, with the Apex versions of these monsters. So I like that there was sort of some connection, but not really, between the monsters. Like the Apex Diablos, for me, really reminded me a little bit of my favorite monster in the entire series, which is the Bloodbath Diablos Deviant. In Japanese, Apex is referred to as Nushi. Nushi is kind of like the boss, the big boy. Like, you know, the boss of the forest, the boss of the lake, the boss of the woods. This is the Nushi, so this is very Japanese sounding, even in Japanese, for something where like you would talk about the apex monster of a region from sort of like a power balance standpoint. The apex monsters not only had a new visual sort of flair to them, which was like this darkened gray with red eyes, but they also got a nice little color treatment to their icon as well. Very similar to how the Frenzy virus worked in Monster Hunter 4 and 4 Ultimate, Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak introduced a new system called the Anomaly virus or condition. These were caused by the Curio, which are these underground parasitic leeches that suck the life force and blood literally out of monsters to bring back to Geismagor. And there's the whole story of Malzeno and the whole relationship between those monsters and this anomaly. And then going even beyond variant, or a condition, the Elder Dragons, there were certain ones that could overcome this affliction and consume the Curio to become a brand new species of monster, with absolute deadly power, cool names, awesome abilities, and new renders as well. So as far as normal monsters, they would be considered to be afflicted by the anomaly. Afflicted monsters in Japanese is called kokuika. Kokui is sort of like being puppeted or being commanded or controlled, sort of because these are leeches that are sort of driving them mad in anger and they're in pain. So I just call them puppeted monsters, but it's not really puppet like in the fantasy sense. But if you notice on their icons, they've got the red curio, they've got the little dots, and they look quite different. And they kind of remind me a little bit of the hyper system, that the curio would sort of gather around certain parts of their body, and when you hit those parts, you can cause them to explode and do extra damage. So sort of a marriage of ideas from past games. As an endgame system, 5 Elder Dragons were able to actually overcome this anomaly and evolve into a brand new species of monster called the Risen Elder Dragons. In Japanese, this is quite a mouthful. This is Kai Kokufuku Koryu. Kai Kokufuku Koryu. Kai is the afflicted or the anomaly. Kokufuku means to overcome, sort of like to overcome a sickness or virus. And Koryu is Elder Dragon. So these are affliction-conquered Elder Dragons. They are, again, not considered variants, but are considered brand new species of monster, which I find interesting. And you can really tell when you fight them because they are quite different and quite a level above what they've done in the previous endgames with these monsters and what they're capable of doing. I will include those in my Elder Dragons for my 5th part of my Bestiary series, and the reason why is that they are not considered variants, but brand new species. That concludes the video. So that's the normal monsters, the subspecies, the rare species, and the variants, and then all the special variants that have been introduced in the last few generations of games. If you look outside the mainline series, variant is kind of the way that they go for a lot of these. So you got variant species here of, like, from Monster Hunter Frontier, there's Supreme, the hardcore monsters, Origin monsters, Extreme monsters, Burst, Zenith, Lone monsters. In Monster Hunter Online, which was that Chinese game, which was actually pretty cool, there was an abnormal type of variance. And of course in Monster Hunter Stories there was the Black Blight monsters, and in Stories 2 they had a new variant called the Rage Raid monsters as well. Hopefully this video was interesting. Let me know down in the comments below what was your favorite type of variant system that they've introduced since Monster Hunter 4. And honestly, I'm just very happy that for each game they're embracing this idea of an endgame system. While there are some hits and misses with the way that they implement them, the idea of just taking these regular monsters and doing fun stuff with them is always a delight, because we know the monsters well enough now that when they do something different with them, it becomes very obvious. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully it answered your questions, and until next time, happy hunting.